Hello to everybody who's danced with death in multiple ways. It's Beautiful Anonymous. 1 hour, one phone call. No names, no holds barred.
I'd rather go one-on-one. I think it'll be more fun, and I'll get to know you, and you'll get to know me.
Hi everybody, Chris Gethard here. The intro on this week's show is very long, but it's because I give instructions on how to claim your copy of Beautiful Anonymous, the magazine. That being said, if you don't like a long intro and you're not interested in the magazine, you're going to want to skip about 13 and a half minutes ahead. That'll put you right towards the beginning of the call. But if you want a copy of Beautiful Anonymous, the magazine, you're going to want to sink your teeth into this week's intro. Thanks so much. Hi everybody, Chris Gethard here. Welcome to Beautiful Anonymous, the show where we explore the human condition one anonymous phone call at a time. Thanks as always for tuning in. I have big news for the community. Every once in a while we do a big community thing, right? There'll be a tour of live shows that gets announced, or we had the big push to do the Canonymous in Brooklyn a while ago, and we had the big push to get people to sign up at beautifulanonymous.com for our extra stuff. Once we launched that, we had the big celebration of when things went independent. The next big community thing is upon us. We have made a magazine. Many months ago, I started taking to the airwaves of this podcast and telling you all, hey, here's a P.O. box address. Mail me stuff. The whole premise of this show is that you can have anonymous phone calls and let me know what's going on via anonymous phone calls. Well, what happens if I have a P.O. box and you send me anonymous stuff in the mail? And we made a magazine out of it. There is a combination of pictures, woodworkings, comics, poetry, plant life, all sorts of random stuff was sent to us. All sorts of stuff. And it was such a joy to go to that P.O. box and check it and see what came in. And it immediately proved to be a heavier lift than I thought. I thought it was going to be like when I was in high school and I had a fanzine and I would just go to the Kinko's and you'd run the photocopier and you'd play with it that way. And I started to realize, man, I'm older than I used to be. This is harder to figure out than I thought. Just scanning it took forever. And after many tries, we were able to get high-quality scans to our friend Alexis Politz, who has done some work for the show before in terms of stuff that's been turned into merch in the past. Alexis went ham. Thank you, Alexis. If anybody out there is looking for graphic design work, when Alexis Politz is offering up freelance, go with Alexis. Alexis took all these random things and started getting back to me with proposed layouts and ways to make it flow. And it was so simple and fun and joyous once we got someone who knew what they were doing to take over the workflow on this magazine. And I'm happy to tell you the magazine has been printed. Andrea is going to pick them up, I think, today, as I'm recording this. We have 1,000 color copies. We have 1,000 black and white copies. And I wanted to just be very clear. We have a system that Andrea and I came up with that we think is the simplest and easiest way to distribute the magazine. Oftentimes, I will come up with things that make sense in my head, and they are cockamamie. Usually when Andrea gets involved, she can tell me if they're cockamamie. And 9 times out of 10, when Andrea comes up with and or signs off on a system, the system actually makes sense. So here's what we're going to do. We're really, really proud of beautifulanonymous.com. I think a lot of the people who signed up, if you are in the Facebook group, you see the comments. If you catch the chatter on Twitter, it's good stuff. At the entry level, you just get more time with each caller in this listener-generated list of questions that grows over time that allows us to just have more time with each caller. It's great. At the higher tier, you get that and a follow-up call with a past caller each month. You get a monthly taping where only the people at that tier get the phone number. And I should also mention, both of these tiers ad-free. You get to remove all the ads from your experience. And then there's a top tier for people who admittedly have disposable income, where you get all of that. Plus, I send a letter to your house and thank you for signing up at that top tier. That's the cellular technology tier. I just put another batch of letters out there. I realized I think a few of them got lost in the shuffle, which is my bad. We have a spreadsheet, and I saw some of these seem to not have an X next to them. So you're either getting your letter very late, which I apologize for, or you're getting a second letter. You're welcome. Anyway, Andrea and I were thinking the very first thing we want to do, and this project, by the way, it took up so much more time than we thought, and the printing costs were so much higher than we thought. And I've mentioned this before. Some of you offered saying, hey, how can we rally and help dissuade those costs? No, this is a community project. It's worth the investment. But when I tell you that after shipping, I think it's going to be over 10 grand that goes into getting this magazine made and out there. But it's worth it. It's worth it. Here's why. If we can use this as a way to get as many people signed up at beautifulanonymous.com, that's what you can do. That's what you can do. So the way it works is this. This episode you're listening to comes out on March 11th, 2025. Anyone signed up at beautifulanonymous.com by March 18th, 2025, we think we can guarantee you a copy of the magazine. If there's a massive explosion of enthusiasm, maybe not, but we're pretty sure based on our numbers and how many we have printed that that's very doable. Now, one of the big questions is people are going to know, hey, I want one of the full color copies. Full color copies, the priority is going to go to the people at the cellular technology tier. They are the people who have bought in at that highest level. It seems like the fairest thing to give them the extra perk, first dibs on the color copy. After that, color copies will be given out to people at the touch tone tier. That's the $10 a month tier. Right now, between cellular technology and the touch tone tier, there's somewhere between 700 and 800 of you signed up. I thank you so immensely for that. But you can see most of those color copies probably are going to be claimed. So if you really want a color copy, you can sign up at the touchtone tier right now. If you're at the rotary tier, you can bump up your membership for the month and give us the extra $5. If you bump it back down, I get it. If you unsubscribe after a month, I get it. We're effectively charging you $5 to $10 for a copy of the magazine, just to have you also have a month where you experience what we're offering over at beautifulanonymous.com. And the hope is some of you sign up, go, I want that magazine. That's a once in a lifetime thing. We're not going to spend $10,000 making a magazine ever again. It's ludicrous. But if enough of you sign up and go, you know what? This stuff over at beautifulanonymous.com, I actually really like it, and I'll stay subscribed for a while, it will start to chip away at the cost and make it worth it because we're really proud of what we have over there. So going to the cell tech level is really the only way to guarantee you get a color copy. I can't imagine we're going to get 1,000 subscribers at Cell Tech in the next week. There's just no way. There's, I think, less than 100 right now. Touchtone subscribers, if you're already signed up at Touchtone, you should get that color copy. If a whole bunch of people sign up for Touchtone, we will go in the length of time that you've been subscribed at Touchtone. So the people who have been there since the beginning will get first dibs. We'll work it out on who's been subscribed the longest. And again, I imagine all of you are going to get color copies. From there, we'll start distributing the black and white copies. A lot of those will go towards the customers on the rotary tier. Again, if you want the color copy, bump up. If we have any copies left over, once we get through all the color copies, we'll start distributing the black and white copies. If we have any black and white copies left over, what we're going to do is sell them, but we are going to make them prohibitively expensive. They're going to be like $20 a pop. So keep in mind, you could get 4 months at beautifulanonymous.com for the amount we're going to charge you piecemeal for these things. If we wind up going on the road and selling these things, and this was Andrea's idea. I was like, we'll just sell them or whatever. Andrea's like, we got to make them so expensive that people realize we want this to be your impetus to go check out beautifulanonymous.com and get this special thing that we're probably never going to do again. So I think you get it. Color copies for the Celtec tier, definitely. Touchtone tier, almost definitely. Rotary tier, you're probably getting the black and white copies. So either bump up now, sign up now, claim the magazine. It's going to be really fun. One final caveat. Again, we're just going to say whoever is an active subscriber on March 18th, that's the list that we're going to go to. Instructions will be given out on how to give us your most updated address and how we can make sure that we're then able to cross-reference everybody, make sure you are signed up. I hope nobody would just sort of try to get friends free copies when they see the system we have in place, but we're going to cross-reference everything. Then we are going to hand stuff the envelopes. I know there's services we can pay for where they would probably print it out and do it for us. But Andrea said, I do kind of love the charm of the handwritten envelope. And I said, this is a podcast that we rely on using technology in ways that feel outdated. Very long phone calls, handwritten letters, a P.O. box, a print magazine. These are things that are not dead, but are feeling more archaic with each passing day. And I do think it is in the spirit of what we do to handwrite the envelopes. So also, it's going to take us forever to get 2,000 of these things out. And the people at the local post offices in my area of New Jersey are going to murder me. So just keep that in mind. It's going to take us a while to distribute these. That's the info on the magazine. Basically, sign up within the next week at beautifulanonymous.com. You should be able to grab yourself a copy if you sign up quick. If you really, really want a color copy, I would get at that touchtone tier. So either sign up there or bump up there from the rotary tier. And that's about it. Instructions will go out after the 18th on how to get us your mailing address, so we know we have everybody's most up-to-date addresses. And that's that. Thanks to everybody who supports, and thanks to everybody who contributed and mailed stuff in. When you guys see this magazine, I think it's going to be the type of thing that you read on the toilet or that you leave on the bedstand in your guest room for guests to look at. To me, two of the greatest compliments you can give a magazine. Toilet reading, guest room, bedstand reading. It's gonna hit that level for you. So thank you in advance. This intro has obviously been long enough. I'll let you know. I think a lot of people are going to love this week's episode. Absolutely a call that I will think about forever. It's funny because in some ways the call is sort of chit-chatty, even slightly political in the beginning. We have a caller who grew up in a number of different places who talks about what it's like to sort of exist in a space where your identity is maybe not as firmly defined as people who are born in one place and stay in one place, existing in that sort of liminal space in between. And it's really fascinating. And we do talk a lot about colonialism. This caller happens to have lived in a lot of places that were at some point colonized by the British Empire. And the caller we talk about it in a very beautiful anonymous caller way. Caller's very pleasant, very laid back. The rage is there under the surface, though. And we don't need to constantly live in a state of rage, but we can talk about where it comes from. Then we get into the parts of the episode that I think it's already a good one, just based on vibes, and then it hits next level. My goodness, this caller has been around some situations of death. We go, that's very unlikely and quite bizarre. And we talk about that in a way that's dark, but kind of funny. There's some chuckles to it. And then we start talking about death in a way where you go, oh no, what's it like to be around death when you're young? And we do kind of isolate what I think is a societal trope that we don't talk about enough, which is the age you're at when you first know someone who dies, who's also your age, is a developmental milestone that I bet people have looked into, but it's not something we sit and talk about in terms of how do we handle that ourselves? How do we raise kids knowing that conversation is going to happen someday? These are the types of things that we get to at the very tail end of this call that are fascinating, and I would argue make it a great call. Enjoy it so much, everybody.
Thank you for calling Beautiful Anonymous. A beeping noise will indicate when you are on the show with the host.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, is this Chris?
Yup, this is Chris. How are you?
I'm good. Oh my God, I truly cannot believe that this is actually happening. I was telling Andrea I've been listening to the show since 2016.
That's awesome. I'm glad you finally got through.
Yeah, I actually started listening to this show when I used to live in the UK, and then I actually grew up in Singapore, so I went back to Singapore after doing my undergraduate in the UK, and I always said that if I moved to the US, the one thing I would try my very, very, very best to do would get on the show.
Oh, that's amazing. So do you live in the US now?
Yeah, I now live in the US. I live in your former city, New York.
So you've been all over the world.
Yeah, that is true. It's been a bit of a scattered existence. I was actually born in India. I grew up between like India and Singapore. So even more scattered if you can think about it.
Born in India, grew up in Singapore. You lived in London for a while, you said?
Well, actually not London. I was in another part of the UK.
Oh, in the UK, and now the States.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Do you feel like someone who's kind of a wanderer, or do you feel like there's one place that you identify as that's where my roots are?
You know, that's a great question. I feel like I have thought about this a lot. I think when people ask me where I'm from, I have a very hard time, there's a very stereotype around this called it's like third culture kids or,
Mm-hmm.
and as much as it is a stereotype, I do think there is some truth to it, because when people ask me where I'm from, I have a very difficult time giving a concrete answer. I think for simplicity, I often say I'm Indian because I do identify very strongly with being Indian. And I went there a lot as a kid. I have a lot of family still there. But I say I grew up in Singapore and then have hopped around a bit since then.
I also, and I'm sure this is something you've thought about, I can't help but notice it does seem like it's been the UK or other places that have at some point been colonies of the UK in their history.
Yes, that is very true. I have to tell you, Chris, I think about colonization often.
I bet you've seen it. You've seen it on multiple continents now.
Yeah, there's that meme about, there's a meme about every day, like men think about the Roman Empire. My Roman Empire is colonization.
You do. You dwell on it hard.
Yeah. Well, I think about it in the context of, how it shapes modern day. And I think it shapes it in more ways than people like to talk about. I think this is a big thing that I found very frustrating living in the UK, was like a lack of acknowledgement writ large, honestly, about how much it shapes present day. Like, I think as many problems as the U.S. does have, for example, like there is, even today in current climate, there is still like an acknowledgement like, hey, we did not do a great thing with slavery. We should not have done that. Whereas it's interesting that in the UK, you can find like quite a lot of variety in people's thought process about that, about colonization, and whether it was truly, like as bad as it is made out to be by some aspects, like some countries that were impacted or not, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. And was definitely mind-blowing to me when I was at undergrad there. And I actually went to like notoriously fancy and also very obnoxious university. I went to Oxford, which is like deep in colonial history.
Yeah, if you are someone who, you sound like a rather chill person, but it sounds like, and I don't want to speak for you, you say you do dwell on colonialism, and I get the sense there might be some quiet rage in there on this topic. I don't get the sense you're sitting around thinking about colonialism as like, oh, what an interesting thing to ponder. I get,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like, it's easy to maybe connect the dots that this is something that pisses you off a little bit. Oxford is a hell of a place to be sitting around thinking of that.
Oh, yeah. It was a real experience. And you are very right, Chris. I'm quite a chill person in life in most regards. But I will say that this definitely inspired quite a lot of rage and frustration when I was at university there. Just because, like the institution is really steeped in this history, and there's really not much acknowledgement at all of, I guess, people's like actual stories and how much it impacted like the development trajectory of countries like to this day. And for me, it's like actually a really interesting personal history as well, because the part of India that I'm originally from is a part that was like extremely impacted by British colonialism. It was like where one of the worst famines in history happened during the period of colonization. Like millions of people died. And even more to that, interestingly, in my own family history, my great-grandfather on my dad's side actually was part of like the freedom struggle and independence movement in India. So I guess it's like close family history.
It is so much to talk about here. And I'm sure we'll talk about this for a while and get to other things. But I will just say, hearing you say that when you lived in the UK, you picked up on, also, to hear anything even remotely complimentary of America right now, oh boy, that's a breath of fresh air. To hear that we at least reconcile the guilt of our colonialism. I don't feel that
way in general.
What's that?
I was going to say, I, the state of affairs in the U.S. in general is difficult for me. Like, I work in the development sector. I work with like a lot of people at organizations like USAID. So I am by no means happy with the current state of affairs, but I will give you guys credit that you do some things right.
To hear, like, at least many of you feel an appropriate level of guilt or responsibility about our past and want to speak on it, I'll take it. Like, hey, you have a really brutal and horrific past, but at least some of you talk about it. I'll take what we can get right now, because the U.S. not crushing it right now. Not crushing it.
No, not crushing it.
No, but I will say, I've sensed the same thing you have, where you don't have to travel much before you start to realize, and we have a lot of English listeners. I mean, no ill will. I'm not trying to talk smack. But when you go to places that were at some point colonized by Britain, you can often track in a way that's very surface level that there is oftentimes tension in these places that was established through divide and conquer British colonial tactics. Like when you look at places that are war-torn historically, and they're all over the world, which is the strange part. Like when you look at Northern Ireland and the Troubles, it's very, very obvious that was push and pull between Catholics and Protestants and the UK and republicanism. And a lot of it was because of colonization. When I traveled to Sri Lanka a few years ago, you start to realize, there have been civil wars here, and there are many broad strokes. I am not smart enough to claim to be any expert, but on a surface level, you realize there are groups that have a lot of anger and tension towards each other today. And during a period of colonization, some of these groups were in favor with the British, some of these were not, and that is at least a part of the source of tension that still lasts. You can look at Palestine right now and remember that
exactly.
You look at a lot of places that wind up mired in decades of struggle, and it must be harsh to be an average citizen of England and look around the world at places where you seem to look at places where a lot of the world is going, oh, they are unfixable. The tension and the warfare there is ultimately unfixable. And a lot of those places viewed as irreparably screwed. The British at some point were the guiding force in those places. It's really, really remarkable. And for you to say that your experience was that people didn't want to talk about that present day reality must have been head spinning and maddening.
No, 100%. I'm so glad you brought up the examples you did, because I could not. I could not point to anything more relevant. Like, I think actually specifically related to Palestine, like, I think the reason why there are so many countries that feel so much solidarity with like this specific issue as well is because so many people feel like their own country's histories are somewhat reflected in it, in that like it is a byproduct partly. Like this whole conflict that you have is like a byproduct of the British really not knowing how to draw borders or like not really caring to like negotiate properly between parties. And then, you know, like there are communities that have been impacted by it for generations to come and are paying the price for it still. And so like, I think that's a big reason why so many former colonies from that used to be British colonies feel so much solidarity with this specific issue, even as their present day history like maybe looks quite different. But also, yeah, I mean, I cannot explain how much this was head spinning for me. I actually studied history in undergrad, and so it was even more spinning for me because I was like, surely someone is going to talk about this, and it was like, nope, we would like to not actually, and like the British gave India the railways, so you should be really grateful.
Yeah, and I don't want to be unintelligent, and there's danger in boiling things down too much, but you don't have to travel too much before you start to realize that there are a lot of conflicts in the world. And again, there are layers to this and there are experts, and I don't want to do the dangerous thing of boiling things down to just base level, but sometimes it is useful to go, oh, there's a lot of tension in the world today between groups of people where at one point one of the groups was told by the British, hey, you're our buddies. You're the ones we like.
Yeah.
And the other people, not as good as you. It's the British and you, and then everybody else underneath you. And I know that that's boiling it down way too much, but it's sort of shocking to realize how that as the broadest, least nuanced umbrella describes so much of current world affairs. Groups that used to be buddies with the British who are still fighting with groups that were told you're not as good as the British and their buddies all over the goddamn globe.
I know. And I'm like, you know, the UK is like fading into irrelevance in some ways. And I'm like, how is this still here? Like all of these years later, this is still like such a through line. And it's just so funny because so much of it is like who became pals with them and who did not. Like unintentionally, unfortunately. But that's like really such a through line in like all of history. I could get so nerdy on this and I won't because I think it'll bore a lot of people. But
I feel like my instinct is to talk with you about this for the entire hour, but I'm with you that I'm also like, ooh, people are going to want us to move on. But for anybody out there who's like, wait, how true is this? I'm telling you, look at it. The British show up and go, this religious group is our friends. This religious group is not our friends. And that defines Sri Lanka to a degree today. The British go, all right, the U.S. are fighting. We're going to be trade partners with, the trading partner. You start to look into it and you go, oh, a lot of America's fighting to continue slavery. Who was buying all the cotton that the South was producing? It was England. They had their fingers on that too. Okay, every time something happens with European politics, now they go, wait, is this going to send Northern Ireland back into chaos? Is Brexit, all the balancing of Brexit? And you go, right, because Protestantism, the Ulster counties up in the north of Ireland, right. Okay, it's the same goddamn thing everywhere.
Yep. you could like copy paste and then just like alter it. It's really like bad plagiarism.
They had a very efficient system of divide and conquer colonialism, and it's worth discussing. Now, another topic coming to mind in terms of you know, we have talked with other people on the show before who have described sometimes people who as sort of existing in this space of how do you identify when you were born one place, moved a series of other places. We've also talked with people who share, I think, common thoughts, being biracial sometimes, existing between cultures.
Mm-hmm.
You are someone who says you felt that way. Now you've landed in New York, which is a place that I know.
Yeah.
I lived in New York for 16 years, where you get to sort of identify, you get to kind of pick an identity in New York. B, if you want to find a group and their representation, I lived near the Little India in Queens. I am certain there's some Singaporean section. There's British pubs, all the cultures you've grown up in. You can cherry pick your involvement in them in New York City.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like that was a big reason why New York was appealing to me because, you know, obviously, like, and I think you meet a lot of people who've also existed in like third identity spaces here, across like not just like their ethnic identities or whatever as well. And so I think it gives you a lot of room for fluidity in a way, and not having to box yourself in a way in which it's quite freeing. Because I think, like, interestingly enough, when I go to India, I don't think people think I'm Indian enough. And when I go to Singapore, people don't think I'm Singaporean enough. So there is a real joy in the in-between fluid space.
Mm-hmm. And how have you been defining your New York experience?
Like overall?
Yeah, like who are you in New York City? This city that I think one of the most intimidating things about New York, having lived there as long as I did, is, man, that city can swallow you up and throw you in a million directions. But it's also a place where you get to define your own experience, maybe more than a lot of other places culturally. So how long have you been in New York, and who are you finding yourself to be as a New Yorker?
I have been in New York now for 3 years at this point, and I find that I feel like I've been able to explore the city both from a perspective of like culture and food, because that's biggest angles for me. Like I have always really admired that aspect of the city and the art scene as well. So I feel like I've been able to have like a really fluid kind of a space for a lot of involvement in all of those things. I think the thing that I find the hardest about the city is like really community. Because I think depending on where you live, like you can definitely build a community. And I think, you know, like New Yorkers will always show up to help out if there's a problem that's happening. But I don't think large cities like this are necessarily designed for community building, which is something that like so many people are trying to solve for, right? Of like, how do you make sure like you actually know your neighbors and that you have like some sort of like organizing within communities that brings people together and that people feel like there's a network that they can rely on? Because I feel like having grown up the way that I did, I was used to having like a huge support network of like family friends and whatnot that I could just show up to their house, or I would go to like third spaces basically that existed, like outdoor spaces and stuff. And we would all just spend time together. And by virtue of that, you develop like a huge support network and community. Whereas I feel like New York is not really geared that way, in that people's apartments are small. So it's like hard to be hosting all the time at like people's apartments. There are not that many third spaces that are kind of like spaces that you can hang out for extended periods of time, where you don't have to like pay to be there, that you can stay for a long time. And so it doesn't foster the same sense of community. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, about like, how do you form community where you live when you live in a big city? for me, like the fact that the guy who works at my pizza store nearby me and the bodega guy and the grocery people, like I know all of them. I can say hi to them. And there's like a wine shop nearby me that I like going to. Like the fact that I know all of these people and that they know me is a lot of comfort, even if they're not like the most meaningful relationships. But having like community, I think, is something that's really hard in the city. And I think like Asian cultures, which is what I grew up in, it's so deep in community that it's hard to find like a good substitute for that.
As someone who lived in New York for so many years and has a deep love for my time in New York, I can say, I think you're right. New Yorkers will step up if you need real help. The phrase, a lot of people will tell you about the United States will say, Californians are nice but not kind. New Yorkers are kind but not nice. And I think there's truth to that. New Yorkers will not be nice to you. But if you fall down, someone will run over and lift you up. If you're trying to carry something way too heavy up the subway steps, or if somebody's there with a stroller and it's a mom who's got a bag on her back, someone will lift that stroller and walk up, but they won't even ask you if you need help. They won't even give you time to say thank you. They will walk away. And if you are in the mood for spending entire days having slightly warm, cursory conversations with clerks at bodegas, with servers in restaurants, with people in passing, one-sentence interactions with people on elevators, if those can fill your soul, New York is the city for you. If you need even one person to ask you how you're doing and genuinely wait around to hear the answer and help hash it out with you, you're going to have a tough time in New York City.
100%. I also think that maybe there's something about my face, because I find that like this happens to me often though, where random people will start telling me their whole life story. And I know that it's not a common thing in the city. And so I'm like, how does this keep happening to me? But I hear the most interesting stories. So I mean, I'm more than happy, but I know it's not a common occurrence.
Because that's not a New Yorker thing. And there is a certain type of thing in New York. You're right. And I went through phases of this, where I'm like, oh, I'm the guy that people are turning to and just pouring it all out. And I'm going, why me? Because I'm just trying to move on with my day like everybody else. What's the type of stuff you're hearing from New York where you're like, I know they probably haven't even told their siblings that, and somehow I just heard it on the one train? Let's go ahead and pause right there, because we have ads. And now is as good a time as any. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by IQBAR, our exclusive snack sponsor. IQBAR is the better-for-you, plant protein-based snacks made with brain-boosting nutrients to refuel, nourish, and satisfy hunger without the sugar crash. I can't tell you how much I've been loving IQBAR products lately. I have IQBARs for breakfast many mornings of the week. I recently got through a bout with the flu due to the IQ Mix hydration product, and you will not meet a bigger fan of the IQ Joe coffee sticks than my wife, Hallie Bullitt. IQ Bar is big in our house, and I would never lie to you guys about that. The IQ Bar plant protein bars are packed with high-quality ingredients. They keep you physically and mentally fit. IQ Bar is totally free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial sweeteners for a natural anytime snack. I love the mint chocolate chip. I love the chocolate sea salt, but I also love the lemon blueberry. I honestly love every single flavor. With over 20,000 five-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are starting their days on the right foot with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. And I'll tell you, here's how much my wife loves the IQ Joe coffee sticks, is I have gone beyond. There have been times where I've been given some samples of this product. I now order them regularly. I use the promo code. I use our own promo code from the show to get my wife those IQ Joe coffee sticks because she loves them so much. And that's on top of the fact that I always have an IQ bar in my backpack because it's the best thing to have when you're on the run and you don't know when you're going to be able to slow down. Nothing beats an IQ bar. Right now, IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus get free shipping. To get your 20% off, text BEAUTIFUL to 64,000. Text BEAUTIFUL to 64000. That's BEAUTIFUL to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. I am somebody who realized, I would say in my 30s, that having a sense of style makes you feel better on a mental and emotional level, making some choices about the clothes you're wearing. But I also realized that elevating your style and putting some thought into that usually meant breaking the bank, but I cannot tell you how psyched I have been with Quince. Quince gives you high-end, versatile pieces at prices you can actually afford. I have upgraded my style by snagging some of their killer stuff on Quince. Quince has these luxury essentials that sync with your vibe and wallet. Quince has all the must-haves like Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50, iconic 100% leather jackets, and comfortable pants for every occasion. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost in the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes, which I absolutely love. They're doing things the right way. I have 2 sweaters from Quince. If you ever see me in public wearing a sweater at any sort of public event, it's one of my Quince sweaters because I look good in them. I feel confident in them. They also hold up so much better. I used to shop at some brands that were more expensive than Quince and that had this reputation. And when I tell you their sweaters got holes in the armpits, along the seams, way quicker when you'd sit there and go, I spent how much money at the Quince stuff. Not only does it look good, it feels good, and it holds up nice. It's great. Indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/beautiful for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/beautiful. Get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/beautiful. Thanks to our advertisers. Now let's get back to the phone call. What's the type of stuff you're hearing from New Yorkers where you're like, I know they probably haven't even told their siblings that, and somehow I just heard it on the one train?
Yeah, exactly. No, there was this lady who I once interacted with who on the subway started telling me about how she used to be a ballerina, and then she was like, but the ballet scene is so unforgiving and people are so obnoxious. And then she was like, my director got me like ousted from my production. And she was like, 5 years later, I'm now here, I'm writing books. And she was like, but like nobody understands the struggle as much as like I do. And then she was telling me about how her like new book scene is like very under the wraps and her family thinks she's not doing anything and she's not working. And I was just like, I am really sorry that this all happened to you. And I was like, I am very, very apologetic that this all happened to you. But I don't know, like, maybe like you should talk to your family about this. Like maybe they would want to help you more. But like a lot of like late in life, people having some sort of existentialism and wanting to turn their life around. That is the running trend in most of my interactions.
What do you think it is about your vibe or your face that makes people feel like you're the one they need to pin down and vomit up these moments of angst towards?
I am not quite clear. I feel like I have occupied this role with my friends throughout most of my life. And this has been a pattern throughout most of my life. I think I look fairly unintimidating to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say that I have like an approachable demeanor, and I think I seem like quite a chill person, so maybe that puts people at ease. But I have realized I think I have functioned in this role throughout most of my life with my friends. I feel like and so I'm not surprised that it continues to be a trend.
Mm-hmm. 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 It is a New York thing.
What do you think about you did that? What do you think about you at that point in time attracted this word vomiting from strangers?
See, for me, it's very different. I don't think I've always been how would I phrase it? I don't think I've ever had an inviting look. I am a strange looking man with a giant forehead and a very strange
I don't
hairline.
think any of this is true, by the
It is
way.
true.
I have seen you in person. I did come to one of your live shows.
That's very nice of you. But I don't think anybody sits there and goes, look at this. They're like, look at this stressed out nerd with the weird hairline. Like, I know what I look like. Nobody's looking at me going like, this person has like a generally warm, inviting energy. I will say, I think there have been some stretches of my life where I have been a little, I don't want to say unhinged because that's a very severe word. But there have been times in my life where I'm, back when I was single and I've gone on record and talked about it on TV and stuff. There were times where I was, staying up late and going out and falling off the wagon a couple times and doing some MDMA. And these were very strange times in my life. And I will say, anytime I was in a phase of my life where I was like, I don't know, I feel a little unmoored and I just kind of am going to let the winds take me where they blow and see what happens. I do feel like people almost instantly were able to sense that was the case and kind of seize upon it. Like if I was at a point where I'm like, I don't know, I'm just kind of like lonely and not feeling like myself and not feeling good, so I'm going to hang out with some friends, and then if they're going to go home, nope, I'm going to stay out and find something else to do. Let me see who else is around. Let me go, okay, I'm near this bar where I know and not falling off the wagon with alcohol, but like, let me go hang out there for a little while until I figure out where I'm going to go next. Invariably, somebody would be like, you seem like somebody who's just bouncing the fuck around life, man, and let me come and tell you some crazy shit, and let me tell you that I'm like, I remember even a few years ago, I was at my family. Every few years what I do is I take all my Amex points because I travel so much, I get so many points, and then what we'll do is every few years Hallie and I will go, we haven't looked at the points for like 3 years, let's just see how many we have. And whatever vacation the points can get us, that's what we'll do for vacation. And it's a nice little thing. Like sometimes we go on trips that we really think about and plan. And then sometimes we just wind up at an all-inclusive resort in the Dominican Republic, which could not be less like my wife's personality. It's not really like mine either. But it's like, hey.
I was going to say this seems very off-brand for both of you.
Very off-brand. But it is fun to just go, we can just go stay at this place for 4 days and points pay for it because I leave every weekend to do stand-up in weird cities in Ohio and Indiana. Like, nice. And it was during March and the March Madness basketball games were on, and I'm a big college basketball fan. And I wound up sitting at an outdoor bar watching a game by myself. And this guy came up to me and he had this real sweaty energy. And he's like, who you rooting for, bud? And I'm like, I root Big East, so it pains me to say it, but UConn on this one. But I'm a Seton Hall fan. But, if it's not against my team, you root Big East. He's like, oh, I totally get that. I'm from New England. I'm from Boston. Boston College used to be Big East. Providence still is this and that. And then he starts, I'm like, it seems like you got like real nervousness around this game, man. He's like, well, I'll tell you. He's like, it's not that I have a lot of money riding on this game, but I run this thing in Boston where a lot of people give me money and I got to keep it sorted out. Who's getting what? And I'm like, oh, are you like a bookie? And he's like, well, I wouldn't exactly phrase it like that and this and that. And I'm like, I always thought that in Boston, that was still kind of a place where if you're going to run a thing like that, you got to be parts of certain organizations. And he was like, buddy, I don't know what. That's me. I don't know what to tell you. That's me. I'm the guy that you're thinking of. And I'm like, well, I'm just talking to a member of the Boston Irish mob right now. And he's actively telling me without any effort to hide it that he is an Irish mobster from Boston. And we sat up all night but then he started telling me about how his daughter was sick and how, oh no, this wasn't the Dominican, it was Aruba. This was Aruba. This was another one of our points vacations. It was a hotel in Aruba that we just, again, out of character for my wife and I, but hey, we could go spend a couple nights in Aruba for points. Let's do it. And the guy was just pacing around like a maniac, but told me like so much about his family and where they were at and what it was like to be a career criminal in South Boston. And then I just went back to my room and my wife was like, how was the game? And I was like, I barely could focus on it. There were 10 other fascinating
You were like, could not tell you. You were like, but do you want to meet a mobster?
It is, yeah, exactly. Andrea, it's funny, Andrea and I have traveled a lot together for Beautiful Anonymous at this point, and Andrea did once accurately describe me as, I never forgot this phrasing. Andrea was like, I've never met someone who is more visibly introverted and yet can, as quickly as you, wind up in a very deep heart-to-heart conversation with your Uber driver. And she was saying it with actual confusion about me. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if there's a word for my personality type, but you're right. I very visibly don't want to be a part of the conversation. But that being said, if the conversation's going down, I'm all in almost immediately, sort of against my will, and they know that.
No, 100%. This definitely happens to me the most in Ubers, which I don't mind at all, just because I'm like, people have fascinating stories. But the things that I have heard, like, there was this one lady, I was in Boston, and I was like in Uber, and we started talking. I would say, like, I think maybe some people would assume I'm more extroverted than I am. I could present quite extroverted, but I'm not really that very extroverted. And so she starts chatting to me, and then, like, somehow we land up on the topic of like her school education in Boston. And she tells me that she was part of like this busing program in the 60s that was doing voluntary busing schemes between schools to support racial integration. And then she starts telling me about her experience, like being one of the only Black kids who was attending the school as part of this voluntary busing program. And she's like going into like a lot of detail about like her family history and the trauma that came up with it. And now her daughter goes to the same school and like how she reflects on that period in her life. And I was like, wow, what an incredible story. And just like, I was sitting here with no agenda and came here assuming I might even fall asleep in this car. And now I know like her entire, I guess, like a big part of her life story. And I was like, wow, that is really crazy. And I'm like, why did she feel compelled to tell me this story? Like, I'm grateful for it, but also I'm like, this is so interesting. Like, of all the people.
Now, being that you and I share some of these traits, the introverts that extroverts realize they can latch on to us. I'm going to ask you a question that's going to tell me almost everything I need to know about your personality, because I've been through it.
Okay.
Based on the fact that you and I are both people who are very, very willing to be quiet, but who in an Uber can wind up in a life-altering heart-to-heart conversation, do you ever sometimes take an Uber pool in the hopes that you will wind up in a potentially crazy conversation? Have you ever taken the Uber pool specifically to see what crazy shit comes out of someone's mouth?
No, I have not.
Oh, see, that's a major difference between you and I.
People's crazy conversations.
What was that?
You do that? That's like my worst nightmare. That would be like my worst nightmare. I find myself in these situations, but I don't like solicit them. Actually, you know what? I have to say the crazy.
Go for it.
Well, you go first, and you go first, and then I'll tell you my craziest version of the story.
I was going to say that I don't invite it in, but if I'm in one of these stretches where I go, man, people are really, I'm standing in line at the Chipotle and I just heard about how someone took human life during the Vietnam War. Like when it starts to come out at me where I'm like, okay, I'm just, anyway, I'll get a burrito with sofritas, pinto beans, please. Like if one of those things where I go, whatever my energy is that's attracting them, I will say there have been moments in there where I go, all right, it's going to take 15 extra minutes, but be $10 cheaper. I'll do the Uber pool to see what the hell happens. I do start to sometimes invite it in just to see.
I think the thing is, I feel like enough of this happens to me without me inviting it in that I'm like, I don't think I need to solicit or put myself in situations for this to happen to me. But I will say that the craziest one that happened to me did not happen in an Uber pool, but happened on a flight. So, I mean, this story can get quite grim, but I will not focus on the grim element of it. But I had gone to, this is when I was in undergrad, I was like 20. And I had flown to the U.S. for my sister's graduation. She was at college here. And then on my flight back to the UK, I sleep really well on flights. And so I got onto my flight, and like the psycho I am, I usually am asleep from like start to finish, to the point that like air hostesses often check to make sure I'm like alive. And so I am asleep as per usual. I have like my noise canceling earphones in, all of the above. My worst fear is someone getting into one of these conversations with me on a flight, because I love sleeping on my flights. And so I have my noise canceling earphones in, I sit down, I go to sleep, and then I wake up like maybe 2 or 3 hours before landing. I realize that there seems to be some sort of like chaos going on in the row in front of me. I can't quite tell what it is. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go back to sleep because this doesn't seem to concern me. And so I go back to sleep, and then I wake up when we land in the UK. The air crew is like, hey, we're going to have to keep people on board the flight, and the medical team and the police will be coming on board. And I'm like, the medical team and police are coming on board. So at this point, I'm like, maybe I should talk to someone and figure out what is going on. And so I look at the guy next to me, and I'm like, hey, do you know what's happening? Like, why are medical teams and police coming on board? And he's like, oh, I was going to ask you, like, you looked so calm this whole flight. Like, the man in the row in front of us, so I was in like the middle rows, like near the aisle. And he goes, the man in the row in front of us died in his sleep. And, you know, like when they came for breakfast, like they tried waking him up and he was just like dead. And then he was like, I saw you wake up and then you went back to sleep. I thought you were like so calm about this. And I was like, I was unaware of the bereavement in the row in front of us on our flight. That is why I looked so calm. But now that I am aware, I'm not feeling so calm. And he was like, oh, like, what do you think? He like looks at this man who, FYI, if anybody is wondering what the protocol is in these situations, it's quite deranged. It's like you cover the body with like a blanket, essentially. And so he is looking over at this aisle, and he's like, looks at me and he goes, what do you think happens to people when they die like this? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I guess they die, like, I assume. And he's like, no, but what do you think happens like to them in the next life? Or like, you know, once they're dead. And I was like, I am not sure. Like, I'm not very religious. Like, I don't have a good grounding in the afterlife or what to think about it. And I was like, maybe they just stop existing. I don't know. And then he's like, you know, like the Bible says that this is like the best way that you can possibly die. And I was like, oh,
on a plane,
okay. Like,
surrounded by strangers?
I don't know, in your sleep, apparently. And I was like, okay, like, I'm glad, sure. And then he's like, you just seem like an intelligent person. Like, surely, like, you have to believe in, like, you know, in something beyond. And I was like, I don't really know what to think, honestly. And then obviously, like, this man who's this is me at just turned 20, and this man who's in his 50s then like pulls out his Bible and puts it on the table in front of me. And he's like, you know, I really think you would benefit from reading the Bible. And then he starts telling me his life story about how, like, he grew up really religious, and he's like, my family wanted me to follow the Catholic Church in India, but I didn't want to. And then I ran away from home, and I lived in the streets for like 5 weeks, and I ran away from religion. But then one day, like, as I was like living on the streets, Jesus came to me, and I had an epiphany, and then I was like welcomed back into my family, and I had this whole new outlook on life. And he's telling me this in like great details about his like life and whatever else.
And
there's like the police
clear,
coming onto the flight.
For the listeners, as he's taking out a Bible and telling you his life story, there's a dead body with just a sheet over it, still buckled in, one row in front of you.
Yes, exactly. And the police are coming on. They're now like questioning people to make sure that there was no like nefarious cause of his death. The medical teams are like assessing this man, and he's like, and this man is like, you know, like, I really just like, I see it that, you know, I think you're going to have a spiritual awakening. And I think we met today and this happened because you're going to have a spiritual awakening. And he then hands me his business card and he's like, I see a lot of similarity in our life trajectory. Like, I think, you know, that we have a spiritual connection and I would really love to hear from you when you have your awakening. And I was like, I am glad you had an awakening, but I need to leave this aircraft immediately. Yeah. And you are confessing to thinking that this man should have died with police right next to us.
Do you still have that guy's card?
I do not. That went straight in the bin.
I'm sure that one did. And then when you...
I was like, I cannot do this.
Do they take the dead body off the plane first, or does everybody walk past the dead body?
No. Well, okay, actually coming back to highly improbable things that have happened in my life, this actually has not happened to me just once, but twice.
And let's hit the pause button, because ads are a thing that exists in a capitalist society. Let's do some. Thrive Market. I'm so happy to tell you about them, especially because my family has been using Thrive Market for years, at least 4, maybe 5 years, well before Thrive ever advertised on the show. We were proud and very happy Thrive Market customers, and it's such an easy thing to tell you about the joy of Thrive Market. Here's a crazy statistic. Over 10,000 chemicals have entered our U.S. food supply. The European Union limits that same list to 300 additives. I'll tell you what, I myself am a pretty busy guy. I don't really have the time to read every single ingredient label and start Googling all those weird chemical names in my food. It's why I love using Thrive Market. They go ahead and everything they're selling is designed to be a more sane, healthier version of a lot of the stuff that's out there. And there's stuff you can get on there that's really hard to find elsewhere. I love Thrive Market. They make it so easy to find better options. They remove so much of the hassle. They have this Healthy Swap scanner in the Thrive Market app, which is so simple. You can scan any item. It will suggest cleaner, healthier alternatives to it. So you might be at a store where you're scanning sugary snacks that your kids like, or beef sticks that are a good, handy, grabbable snack, but there's tons of stuff in there. You go ahead, you scan it. That app lets you know what Thrive Market has that is an equivalent without all the chemicals, without all the concerns. And I'm going to tell you, 99.9% of the time, it also is a better tasting version of the thing. And I can tell you that personally. And guess what? It all gets delivered right to your door, and you get savings on every order. Thrive Market takes the guesswork out of finding safe, healthy food. Their products are 100% non-GMO, free from over 1,000 harmful ingredients. Their on-site filters make shopping even easier if you're looking for dye-free snacks, non-toxic cleaning products, high-protein meals that fit your dietary preferences. Thrive Market has you covered in a few clicks. I can tell you that I have a 5-year-old kid. He likes chips. He likes candy. And I can tell you, he has versions of those things that he loves so much that have none of the chemicals of the things that you grab off the shelves, and it gets mailed to my house, and we're not breaking the bank on it. It's awesome. Thrive Market's Smart Cart feature is no joke, takes the stress out of replacing junk food. Thrive asks you questions and automatically builds a grocery cart tailored to your needs, filled with healthier alternatives to your favorite brands. From there, you can adjust, add, or remove items before checking out. It's a really incredible service. I've been using it for years, Hallie Bullitt is one of the biggest proponents of Thrive Market out there, and I never bring her name up unless it's for real, for real. If you are ready for a junk-free start to 2025, head to thrivemarket.com/beautiful stories. Get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/beautiful stories. thrivemarket.com/beautiful stories. I don't know about you, but I like keeping my money where I can see it. Unfortunately, traditional big wireless carriers also seem to like keeping my money too. After years of overpaying for wireless, I finally got fed up from crazy high wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks that actually cost more in the long run, switched to Mint Mobile. You can say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plans and their jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. That is the thing that drives me most nuts. Oh, here's the text message with the completely random amount this month. Mint Mobile's here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month. If you like your money, Mint Mobile's for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/beautiful. That's mintmobile.com/beautiful. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5 GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Thanks to all our advertisers. Now let's finish off the phone call.
This actually has not happened to me just once, but twice.
Twice dead people
So
on
I
the
can tell
planes?
you the difference. Yes, so I can tell you the difference in aircraft protocol even. So some planes, yes, I know. There's, and I should say this all happened within the span of like a year and a half. Twice in 1.5 years. Yeah, I think for that 1.5 years, I was like, I'm a Grim Reaper. This is like an unintentional Grim Reaper as well.
What happened the second time?
Oh, God, the second time was like, again, well, I should say on both of these flights, they were big aircraft. These were like those really giant aircraft where multiple people are like, where it's like hundreds of people on a flight. And yet those times it was in the row in front of me that this happened.
Sorry to laugh, but that's an amazing detail.
No, but it's so true. Like, I honestly, after being horrified the first time and horrified so much the second time, I also now just found it increasingly funny because I'm like, the likelihood is just like, this should not have happened. The second time, I was on a flight and I was going from Singapore to India. And in the row in front of me, again, I was like sitting right next to the bathroom. And this man goes into the bathroom and he comes out. And this one was honestly worse than the first one because I was actually awake for this flight. It's a shorter flight. It's like 5 hours. And I was like multitasking something. I think I was working on the flight. And so I was awake and this man collapses when he leaves the bathroom on the aircraft. And then he starts having a heart attack. It was so awful. Like, the air crew is actually trained in doing CPR. If nobody knows this, maybe it should be comforting. I don't know. But the air crew starts like doing CPR. They call the doctors that are on board the flight. They spend an hour trying to resuscitate this man in, like, once again, one row in front of us. I felt really awful though, because his family was there and they were like watching this whole thing happen. It was horrible. And what was most psychotic again is that I was sat next to someone who was just like in a completely different dimension. I'm not sure if he was disassociating or what was going on with him, but this man had like his laptop out and he was working on his laptop the whole time. He was like writing emails and he was actually the person in the aisle seat. Like, I was in the middle. The man who was in the aisle seat, who's like in view of this family the whole time, is sitting there like writing emails. And this guy is like being resuscitated like one aisle away from him. And then I guess like the air crew didn't want to panic people, and so they told them. And so they continued to do like food service. And I was like, I'm not eating right now? Like, that seems weird and inappropriate. And this guy finishes writing his emails, puts his laptop away, and then just like eats this whole meal. Like like polishes his whole tray of food, whilst this other man is like being resuscitated in front
So
of us.
there's a man dying, and he's just like, yeah, I'll take the chicken, and thank you so much.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, literally. And I was like, "Are you okay? Like,
Are you a
I don't
human?
know what is happening." Yeah, I was like, I don't know what I'm more scared by, like the situation in front of me or your reaction. I don't know. It was truly absurd. And then I got off the flight and I was like, wow, I cannot believe this happened to me again. And I was going to text my family. And I was telling them, I was like, you will not believe what happened on this flight. And my sister, as a joke, was like, did someone die? And I was like, yes, someone did die. And then I walked past an air hostess who was like, I've been doing this for 15 years, like, and I've never had this happen to me. And I was like, twice to me, 1.5 years.
When you fly now, do you always kind of just quietly look at the people in the row in front of you and just take a deep breath and wonder which one of them will die?
No. Thankfully, it's been a long time since this has happened to me, and I'm counting and praying, though I'm not religious, that this does not reappear as a trend in the future.
Wow. The unintentional Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper of the sky.
Yeah. Really unintentional. One of my friends at one point was like, are you sure you're not like an accidental assassin? Like, I hope not. I'm not aware of it, if so.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's really wild.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? It's so funny. When Andrea was asking me about what I wanted to talk about, I didn't even think about talking about this one, just to tell you the scope of like wild things that have happened in my life.
That didn't even occur to you. That wasn't even part of your pitch.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. This came up entirely accidentally.
Have we talked about anything you talked with Andrea about yet?
No, actually. I'm sure she's going to be thrilled on the follow-through rate.
No, Andrea just typed genuinely my favorite type of call.
Yeah, we have not gotten to any of that.
Well, we've got 12 minutes left. I don't know if you want to get to it or just keep going in different directions. Up to you.
Oh, damn, this is so hard. I was going to make this like a choose your own adventure for you, because I was like, I could take this call in a really dark direction where I could keep it light. So I don't know, Chris, do you have any feelings?
I mean, you already told us about witnessing 2 deaths, and we had a brief overview of the pitfalls and the impact of British colonialism.
But they were not done in like a grim way, you know?
What qualifies as grim to you? Let's go grim. I need to know what qualifies as grim to you if witnessing 2 deaths isn't grim. And we've got 11 minutes. Okay,
I can take it in that direction. But it's going to get sad, Chris. I don't know if you want it to get sad.
I'm following you. If you don't want to get it sad, we can go in a different direction if you want. But I have no problem with sad.
Okay. Well, neither does the audience base that listens to Beautiful Anonymous. So I can touch on a bit of sad. But I guess like actually originally what I thought I would talk about when I called and I told Andrea about this is actually, you know what, in hindsight, it is partly connected to what we were talking about. But I was telling Andrea that actually like when I first started listening to Beautiful Anonymous was when I was in college, and I was, you know, like I think I'd been having like a hard time in general, adjusting to undergrad and like I guess college life. And then I had this year where I just was like coming back to this unintentional grim rebirth thing, I was just like surrounded by so much death. And part of it was this flight experience, actually. Though in hindsight, I now look at this and it's mainly funny to me. Part of it was this flight experience, which I think, like, I don't think I had really thought about my mortality very much before then. I was like 19 or 20 at the time, so I really wasn't thinking about it. And then this flight experience really like triggered that off for me, like thinking about this really. And then the space at that time as well, where I think I was like feeling quite depressed and I wouldn't say I was actively suicidal, but I was definitely having thoughts about it. And then this flight experience happens and I'm like, oh, this makes death like really real, like in a way in which I just don't think I had really processed earlier. And then later that year, like 6 months after that, I would say, like, for whatever reason that year, there were just a lot of people in my orbit who were my age who ended up passing away, like kind of more distant people, I would say. And then that summer, right after that, I had a very good friend of mine who I'd, grown up with. And she was actually from Bangladesh, and she used to go back to Dhaka, which is the capital city. And there was this really, really awful terrorist attack that happened in Dhaka, which was the capital. And there was a siege of this cafe that like a lot of people used to go to. And I think like it was a terrorist group that took over this cafe and they held people hostage for like 8 hours. And then 3 of her very, very good friends who I had grown up hearing a lot about as well, had like met 1 or 2 of them as well in the course of our friendship, actually ended up dying in that terrorist attack. And my friend was actually in Dhaka that day, and she was meant to have gone to the cafe with them and just happened to not. And I had been messaging her like the whole night as she was finding out about like what happened to her friends and getting useful information. And that whole experience just like completely transformed how I thought about my own mortality, but also how I thought, I guess, about like trauma, and coming back to, I guess, closing the loop actually a little on like how much, I guess, I realized I was a bit of like an emotional sponge, and having occupied this role of like being a listener and someone who engages with a lot of people's like very heartfelt, difficult stories in their life, I don't think I realized like how much of her trauma I kind of absorbed during the period in which she was really like grappling and dealing with the death of her friends and thinking about mortality and life and like impermanence of life. And I ended up being like, I guess she was a very good friend of mine. I talked to her all the time. We spent a lot of time together that summer. And I ended up it was really fascinating to me. It completely transformed my perspective on death, but also actually gave me like genuine secondhand PTSD, which I wasn't even aware was something that could happen to people. But apparently, according to psychiatrists much later on, I found out is an actual clinically diagnosed thing that can happen to people. And I think I thought about it so much after because I was like, oh, like, I never thought that, I guess, like having this much openness and receptiveness to like listening to people's really difficult stories would have the ability to impact me in that way. But it really did. And I'm sure you in this job especially have felt that a lot. But actually that was originally like one of the things I was going to talk about, because I was like, I think this is I guess it's an area that doesn't really get talked about enough. And I don't think people have like an awareness of in terms of that secondhand PTSD aspect.
Man, you weren't kidding.
Yeah.
We only have about 6.5 minutes to hash this all out, but I'm happy to try.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chris.
That's okay. When you are feeling all this, events happening to people far away in the world, you're feeling the residual effects of this trauma. You said it redefined your feelings about death. I'm wondering what you mean by that.
I think seeing people in different phases of life, I guess, dying in the span of 1 year. It gave me a lot of perspective on what it means to, I guess, like, have your life truly cut short versus like some of the other people. I remember like that year also a grandparent of mine died actually. And I remember thinking that like with my grandparent, I was like, okay, I can appreciate the fact that at least they had a full life. They were quite old at that point in time. Whereas like with the people who were like younger, who were around me, I think I was just like so taken aback. I guess people always say, you know, like young people don't think about their own mortality. I was never really a risk taker to begin with, but I don't think I was thinking about my mortality. And I think it like really forced me to find a way to be more present in my day to day. I think I used to have so much like existential anxiety about things that were just, you know, like longer term life things or not grounded in my day to day. And this really forced me to be like, you know, tomorrow you could literally not wake up. So you better just like make the most of your actual day to day.
Yeah, that's a very sobering moment. For me, I've mentioned it on the show a few times before, but I had a friend who I was very, very close with growing up, and then we grew apart. And when we were in our 20s, he died of a drug overdose, and it was that was my moment of realizing, oh, someone my age.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I mean, it was a long time ago, but that feeling when you're young and you realize, oh, someone my age can die is it. I think for everybody, that is a developmental milestone that everyone encounters at some point, and that we don't really brace people for. We don't really talk about it, but I think that is a fundamental thing that everybody remembers. What's the first thing that happened where you realize, oh, I'm not immortal, and people my age aren't? Like someone's gone. And I mean, I was 25 years old when my friend passed, and it was really,
I was
really sobering.
20. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel
but
like
it's so true, and I think it's like we didn't expect it to happen that early. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, no, never. It's really a sobering thing. I feel like it's one of the things that everyone knows their version of it after it happens, and everyone wonders why we don't talk about it a little bit more. I think it's a major developmental step in growing up. Is how old were you and what were the circumstances the first time someone you knew who was your age or close to it passed away? I think that's a really personality defining thing for everybody.
Yeah. And I also think the other aspect to it is I don't think I understood how much, you know, even like the second, even if it's not someone that's specific to you, but like, for example, in this situation, like, I think I was so in denial about the fact that I was exhibiting any symptoms of PTSD because I was like, it's not like my best friend is the person who died. Like that wasn't the person who died. Yet, because I guess like there had been so much like lifetime retelling of what was happening to her friends and the information that she was getting in the moment of when this terrorist attack was happening, like I got a lot of secondhand PTSD from it, which I didn't even realize was a thing.
Yeah. How did you deal with that?
Oh, a lot of therapy, which just so much therapy. I was really, really quite unhinged, in your words, for at least a year.
Yeah. I think there's some element to the idea that whenever that happens for you is probably a point at which your childhood is either over or heading towards being over. And that's a really, really hard thing to feel and understand.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I felt the same after it at all. Like I can definitely see it as like a period in which I firmly felt like childhood was very much over because there was just no shielding of anything, and it was all over the internet as well. So like there is truly no shielding of it, and all the details of it were all over the internet.
I remember it. I don't know why that one's still taboo, but it is. I guess it's one of those things that no one knows how any individual is going to go through it. So how do you sit down and talk about it or warn a young person about it without totally freaking them out?
I agree. I actually don't think there is a good way to warn people about it. Also, I think, like conceptually, we try and tell kids about the cycle of life and that, like, people can die. But I don't think that there is anything that prepares you for actually experiencing it relative to yourself.
I got to tell you, we just hit 0 on the clock, and that's one of the most grim notes we've ever ended an episode on.
Oh, no. I'm so sorry, Chris.
I love it. For an episode that honestly had like so much charm and so many laughs to it, for us to just end it by being like, and yo, straight up, we don't brace young people enough for death, and they need to think about death. Anyway, say goodbye to everybody on the free feed.
Oh, God. Bye, everyone. I'm sorry.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, God. I'm like, so many people are going to be like, what was that ending?
I love it. But listen, that's why people need to sign up at beautifulanonymous.com, because now I get to ask you 5 random questions, and those random questions, I'm sure, will bring us back to the place of, at times dwelling on death, but with also a lot of giggles and charm and whatnot. So perfect episode to sign up for, to see if this one keeps going down the rabbit hole of death in a grim way, or if we bounce back to death in a funny way.
Yeah, okay. I'm totally game for this. I'm happy to channel as many people towards your towards your non-free feed as possible. I am a subscriber.
Oh, thank you so much for subscribing.
And I keep plugging it to everyone.
Caller, thank you so much. I can't tell you how fascinating I found this call. You are cool. I feel lucky that I got to talk to you. Thank you to our producer, Andrea Quinn. I also think you're cool, even though you're going to be mad that I said you're cool. You know who's really cool is Shell Shack. They've been cool forever. They offered up our theme music. Support Shell Shack. Go to punchup.live/Chris Gethard if you want to know more about me, including live dates. I have more editions of that show hosted by Chris Gethard coming up, and I'm doing stand-up in Honolulu in April. So punchup.live/Chris Gethard. Our voicemail number is 973-306-4676. We're on Instagram at Beautiful Anonymous Pod. We are also on TikTok. You can find us on TikTok. The Facebook discussion group is called Beautiful Anonymous Community, and it's great. Sign up, everybody. This week on Beautiful Anonymous Plus, here's some of what you'll get from the 5 questions.
Our condo used to do Halloween, like all the houses that wanted to sign up for it could. And there was this one American lady who took Halloween so seriously, to the point that I actually used to avoid going to her floor because I was so scared. She would lie in like a coffin outside of her door. And then when kids would show up, she would like jump out of the coffin and then like chase them down like 2 floors.
That feels like the shit that makes me proud to be from the USA. Hearing that there's Americans out there in other countries behaving like that in the service of teaching people in Singapore what Halloween should really be about, terrifying children and going way too big. USA. For the first time in a while, I have said those initials with pride. Don't forget to sign up for Beautiful Anonymous Plus at beautifulanonymous.com.